Over half of manufacturers are expecting their profits to drop this year. This is because of ongoing trade issues, tariffs, and increases in input costs for manufacturers. In this video, we're going to show you exactly how you can increase your profits in 2025 using AI. In this video, we're going to cover the current manufacturing landscape and the profitability challenges facing manufacturers. I'm going to show you how you can capture more high margin revenue opportunities, show you some strategies of how you can sell more equipment with better margins, the methods to boost the productivity of your current workforce, and then we're going to show you a practical AI implementation plan for how you can get started implementing AI in the areas that matter most to your business. So why listen to me or anything that I say in this video? Well, my background is mechanical and manufacturing engineering, and I've been working in the manufacturing industry since 2020. My role in the manufacturing industry began as a data analyst and data scientist at Intel, where I worked on asset management and energy conservation projects where we would identify areas where you could save money or reduce maintenance cost on assets. And my experience since then has been implementing AI in different sorts of businesses and more specifically in the manufacturing space. So why are profits dropping in the manufacturing space and what can be done about it? First, why are they dropping? Well, input costs are expected to increase another 5.5% this year, and they increased about 6% last year as well. The problem here is that manufacturers are struggling to up their prices in accordance to that increase in their input costs. So manufacturers are on a spread here of about 2% in terms of lower profits, in terms of what they're expecting to be able to charge versus how their input costs have increased. The trade concerns in the manufacturing space are obviously having a lot of difficulties. Things are changing by the day, and that makes it really difficult for you to predict what's going to happen 2 or 3 months down the line. And then also there is a productivity stall in terms of the manufacturing industry. We're seeing that generally across the whole economy, and in previous years in the manufacturing space, productivity was growing over 2% and it's now less than 1%. And what does that mean? Well, when you look at the workforce crisis in the manufacturing sector, the average manufacturing employee is making about $28, $29 an hour in the production areas of the business. It's higher in other areas of the business. I think overall it's somewhere in the range of about $35 an hour if you go average across all manufacturing jobs. When you compare this to the tech sector, that is somewhere in the region of $42 or $43 an hour. So obviously that's a very significant difference, somewhere in the range of 30%. And that means that the majority of young people are not interested in taking jobs in the manufacturing space. And this is compounded by the fact that most of the manufacturing sector is generally older employees, and 25% of the workforce is going to be retiring in the next 5 to 10 years. And if all of those people leave the manufacturing space and there's nobody coming in to replace them, you're obviously going to end up with more open jobs than can be filled. And currently there's about 400,000 jobs that are open in the manufacturing space, and that's going to increase over the next 10 years. And it's expected that might be somewhere in the region of 1.9 million jobs that are unfilled. And what happens in this scenario is you get a profitability squeeze at these companies where the cost of labor is increasing, but the productivity is not. And when the cost of labor keeps increasing, as well as the input cost of things keep increasing, but productivity is stalled out, there is no more margin for these manufacturing companies. And obviously if they cannot make profits, they will tend to downsize their staff. So we need to make sure that the manufacturing companies are able to increase profits in order to be able to hire people, pay them better, and continue to grow in this industry. So what is the solution to this problem? Well, the solution is service-based revenue, or one of the solutions is service-based revenue. If you look at the equipment sales down here on the left, manufacturers are making somewhere in the region of 11% profit on their machine and equipment sales. And that is actually probably a little higher than what we generally see with the manufacturers that we work with. They're usually somewhere in the region of 5 to 10%. And what does that mean? Well, if you make a 5 to 10% profit on your initial equipment sale, and then you're providing free service to your customers downstream of that, then over time, you're actually going to lose money on that machine. So you need to be charging for service. You need to be charging service contracts. And the reason for this is, if you look, there is somewhere in the region of 25 to 40% in terms of profit margins for service-based offerings in manufacturing companies. And if you're doing a lot of service, you're doing a lot of call out to these companies, you're going out to the manufacturing side and you're building the relationship with these customers, you're more than likely going to be their choice when it comes to buying spare parts. And as you can see, spare parts are somewhere in the region of 50% margin. Usually it's somewhere between 40 and 50% is how much money people are making off these spare parts. So the moral of this story here is, if you're a manufacturing company, you've been around for a long time, it's a very good chance that you've got a huge customer base who could be buying service contracts from you who are not buying those service contracts. So now, how do you capture more service contracts and other high margin service opportunities? Well, the first place that you need to be looking at is the point of sale. So when your team is selling a machine, selling a piece of equipment, they need to be trying to bundle that service contract as part of the initial sale. So what I mean by this is, obviously you're going to usually sell some sort of warranty when it comes to any machine that you sell. It's going to come as standard. It's not an upgrade or anything, and it's going to be usually 1 year. If you can attach a service contract that auto renews after that 1 year is finished, there is a very good chance that you'll be able to keep that service contract for the full lifetime of that equipment. What I would recommend here is that you basically put in a little bit of a discount here. You say, if you're able to sign up for this today, you're going to get a 20% discount based on if you sign up for this when your warranty expires. Then the next step, if you've got current customers who have warranties that have not expired yet, you need to reach out to these customers between 1 and 3 months before that contract expires. The reason for this is, if you can reach that customer before their current contract expires, the chances that you increase, and the chances that you sell a service contract to that customer significantly increase versus trying to reach out to them after the warranty has already expired. Another opportunity here is when you go out and you do your field service visits. When you're on the manufacturing side, you're going to have to collect more data and show the customer why it is more valuable for them to have a service contract than to call you out for a break fix, or to call you out for a specific preventative maintenance visit, once every year or once every 2 years, or whatever they're currently doing. And this is the whole purpose here, is you need to demonstrate value to the customer. You need to show them that it is more valuable for them to buy a service contract from you than it is to get these break fix contracts or whatever it might be that you're currently doing. And how you prove this is, you need to show what is the downtime that's been avoided. If they can be conservative with this as well, right? If you can prove to them that even if you save them 4 or 5 hours of downtime per year, that they're going to make their money back, they're going to work on that with you. They're definitely going to want to go in there, because if you have a highly important piece of equipment at that manufacturing site that goes down, that is going to cost them significantly more than any sort of preventative maintenance contract is going to cost them per year. And looking past these types of kind of basic maintenance options and basic maintenance packages that you're probably already selling, there are 2 big opportunities that I see for manufacturers in the next 4 to 5 years. Well, let's say 2 to 5 years. The first one being online training courses. You'll see this from some of the big manufacturing companies already. They're already doing this. Online training courses have serious margins. I'm talking 60 to 90% margins, especially when you reach scale. What that means is, if you can get your customers to be learning about your products, learning how to use your products, learning how to optimize the use of your products in their factory, that's going to have a huge impact on your margins. And it's also going to have an increased chance of that customer purchasing more from you, because if you can help them get their new employees, of which there's going to be a lot over the next 5 to 10 years with all of these people retiring, if you can help them get them up to speed faster by doing your training course, that's going to be worth a ton of money for these manufacturing companies. I'm going to do a full video on that in the future, where you're going to see all of the information around how you can structure an online training course and how you can maximize margins while providing maximum value to your customers. Predictive maintenance as a service is a significant opportunity if you're someone who sells any sort of machinery, equipment, or what have you to manufacturing companies. The market for this is already growing significantly, and as you'll see, the margins for something like this are probably in the 40 to 50% range. What you're going to see is that if you can start to prove to your customer that you'll reduce the downtime that they have in their factory by using your software, it's an absolute no-brainer, and you'll be able to capture somewhere in the region of 5 to 20% of the value that you save that customer. This will depend on how big the customer size is and things of that nature. But if you're able to put this sort of a system in place and build this sort of software that you can sell to your customer, you're going to be able to increase profits, increase recurring revenue significantly. And this is something that is more of a long-term opportunity. I wouldn't necessarily think that this is the first or lowest hanging fruit for you in your business, but it's definitely something you need to be considering as you move forward. Moving on to field service opportunities now, and I mentioned a little bit on field service a couple of minutes ago. The goal for your field service team should be to sell more service contracts and parts. And the reason why you need to sell more service contracts and parts is because if you can sell more service contracts, you can start to optimize your routing and scheduling for each of those customers. And what that does is it increases the profit margin for every single one of your service contracts. And there obviously is a chance for you to then pass those savings on to the customer if you wish, but you don't necessarily have to. And what way can you go about actually providing the value to the customer in these visits? You need a field service application. You need something that your team can take pictures with, take voice notes, take text notes, scan QR codes for individual machines if you have them on any of your machines at the site. And automatically at the end of the day, you'll want to be then creating a field service report for that customer. And that field service report is going to generate ROI numbers. It's going to show the downtime reduction that you've saved that customer, and it's going to prove the value that you've generated during that break fix visit. By proving the value to your customer, you can show them why it makes sense to have more of these visits and why it makes sense to bundle that as a contract, because obviously your contracts are better value for the customer than a single break fix visit. Then you're going to want to look at how you're going to structure that report in terms of how you're going to put a quote or any sort of upsells in that report. Two opportunities in here. There's the upsell of the service contract, and then there's the upsell on selling more spare parts. If your team is able to identify parts on machines that do tend to wear out more quickly than others, things that are critical components that are difficult to get, you're going to want to try to push that customer to store those on site and pay for those upfront, so that if there is any sort of break or breakdown of that machine, that when your team goes out there, they don't necessarily have to bring the parts with them, and they don't necessarily have to order and wait for those parts in order to get out there. That's going to save that company a significant amount of that unplanned downtime. So again, you're showing that customer how you're going to make an ROI for them by storing those things on site. And what does that have in terms of benefits for your company? Well, you get to sell more service, or you get to sell more spare parts. You get to essentially distribute your inventory across to your customers. So you're storing less inventory on site and more out with your customers. And that just means that you're selling more spare parts and you're also reducing your inventory costs. So there's two benefits there. As I said a couple of minutes ago, you're going to be able to optimize the scheduling so that your team can hit all of the important sites at the same time in the same area. And that's much more easy to do when you've got service contracts, because you may have 3 or 4 visits that you need to do for each customer per year, or maybe it's less than that, it might be 1 or 2. But if you can coordinate those so there's less travel time in between each of those sites, you're going to be able to increase the margins of those visits. And some of the results that we've seen from this is you might be able to get up to 30% more site visits per technician. And this is obviously a huge benefit when it's really difficult to find these technicians at the moment. Field service technicians are highly skilled. They have a lot of experience in most cases, and they're not particularly easy to find. The benefits outside of this is that you're going to sell more service contracts. sending more quotes to customers, it's just a numbers game, right? If you're actually quoting your customers, if you're showing them the value, you're going to sell more. It's just a numbers game. If you're not quoting your customers and you're not giving them the opportunity to buy from you, the chances are they're not going to come looking for a service contract. So then, as we talk about quoting and we talk about selling more, how are you able to sell more products? And how are you able to sell more products at better margins as well? In terms of how you can sell, obviously every time you sell something, you have to send a quote to your customer. AI can help you to improve the speed at which you can send those quotes to customers. If you're able to send those quotes to customers faster within a couple of hours rather than a few days, that means that one, you get more conversion of those, you're going to win more contracts and more product sales. Because obviously if you're the first person to give a quote and that customer is in a rush to make that purchase, you're going to be the one that gets that contract. Secondly, then, you're consistent in your pricing. If you have an automated system, it's going to do it the same way every time. You're not relying on new people that have come into the business to generate quotes, and you're not relying on things to get checked by multiple people. The AI system will quote it, you'll have one person that checks it, and then it'll be sent to the customer. The other benefit of this that makes these quotes more accurate is if you're in a situation right now where your input prices are changing significantly day by day or week by week, if it takes you a week to send a quote, by the time that you've sent that quote, the price may have already changed, and now you may be making a slightly smaller margin on each of those sales that you're actually making in terms of product. So you're going to get higher margins, you're going to close more deals. It's just an absolute no-brainer if you're a manufacturing company and you want to sell more product. As we talked earlier about the productivity increases, in terms of doing more and selling more, one of the things that we talked about earlier was the fact that the productivity in the manufacturing space is not increasing. There are significant reasons for this. In my opinion, the majority of this falls on the heads of the ERP providers. The ERP systems are failing manufacturing companies, and what they are doing is they are creating data silos where all of your information sits in systems that do not connect to each other. In the off chance that you're already using a cloud-based ERP, you're probably paying hundreds of thousands of dollars per year for your licenses for that. So that is another problem, obviously. Anyway, we won't touch on that in too much detail, but when your systems are not connected, it creates all of these manual processes where people need to move information from different systems. There's lots of data entry into multiple different systems. That also causes data visibility problems because your data is spread across all these different systems, and it's hard to join all of those together into unified dashboards so that you can look at your KPIs across different business units and across different processes and see a full flow across your whole business in a single dashboard. That is not possible a lot of the time in these current systems. You also get these integration challenges where a lot of these older software tools don't have APIs, or maybe you have to use an ODBC connection to go directly to the database. Lots of tools that people use, such as Zapier or Make and these sorts of workflow automation tools, it's probably not going to be possible for you to do that yourself using those tools. You're going to have to look at using some custom code. But luckily, AI is really good at writing custom code, so you will have that on your side. What are some of the problems that come up when we see all of these disconnected systems and information spread across all these systems? Well, 1.5 to 2.5 hours per day is spent by manufacturing teams searching for information. If you can think of that from the perspective of if you can save half of that time, which is really possible by connecting these systems together and giving a unified place where people can ask questions and find information, you could be looking at a 10 to 20% productivity increase per employee. Think about that. 10 to 20% per employee. If you can get 10 to 20% extra from each employee that you have, that's like getting, for a 100-person company, it's like getting 10 to 20 extra employees. Think of how much that will cost you if you wanted to get 10 to 20 extra employees. In terms of what all of this means, if you start to connect all these systems together, you get real-time visibility of your data across all these systems, across different departments, and you can really start to optimize these processes. You're going to get significantly reduced data entry errors. You're going to get faster and more accurate decision-making, more informed decision-making, because your team has access to the information that they need to make that decision. You're going to streamline a lot of the workflows in terms of a lot of these manual processes that your team are currently doing do not need to be done. Probably about 25% of the things that your team does at the moment are automatable. This is obviously a huge opportunity when you're talking about big workforce shortages and the chance of increasing in workforce shortages in the manufacturing space. You need to be taking advantage of these productivity opportunities, because otherwise you're not going to have enough people to do the work. So what does all of this mean for your whole company? Well, if your team can effectively communicate across departments better, if they're able to share information across departments better, you're going to have a much more efficient system. And what you're doing when you start to connect all these systems together is you're starting to build a foundation that your AI systems later will use. And some of the different AI systems that you can look at are these predictive analytics tools, but also when you start hearing, you're probably hearing talk of AI agents and what AI agents are going to mean for the manufacturing space. Well, AI agents will do nothing for your company if you don't have data that flows across different systems. The AI agent needs clean, structured data that it can search through and look for in order to be able to use that and make good decisions. If you don't have that, it's just not going to work. You're not going to be able to use AI agents. They're not going to be able to search through these ODBC connections and try to find this data. It needs to be stored in a nice, unified place. But coming back to what these other systems enable more in the short term is this predictive analytics for cost savings. We talked already about predictive maintenance, and this is going to be important for your internal operations as well as your external operations. Think of what happens when you can reduce, firstly, the cost of the maintenance, but also the downtime that's associated with maintenance. If you can also enhance the quality of the outputs of all of your machines, think of this in terms of being able to spot these things earlier, being able to identify things that need to be reworked earlier in the process so you spend less time on those going through your manufacturing process. That can have a significant increase in your margins. If you're also looking at inventory optimization, it's quoted that somewhere in the region of 30 to 50% of most manufacturing companies' inventory could be cut. So if you're talking about a 10 to 20% cost of inventory, you could be looking at a 5 to 10% overall reduction in the cost of your inventory every year, just by reducing how much inventory you're holding. And how do you make sure that you don't have stockouts, and how do you make sure that you've got optimal inventory levels while you're reducing inventory? Is you're going to be using predictive analytics to look at the demand profile for all of the different things that you sell, and then you're going to be able to have those min-max levels set at such a point that you can make sure that you do not have those stockouts. Along with reducing the actual cost of storing that inventory, you're going to be able to get better supplier deals and negotiate better deals with your suppliers based on the fact that you know when your materials or when you're going to need to purchase a certain amount of any given part or input material over the course of the year. If you can go to a manufacturer and say, hey, look, we're going to buy $1 million worth of this one material over the course of the next year. Can you give us a 3 to 5% decrease, or we'll probably just go to one of your competitors? Pretty good chance that you're probably going to get that. It's only a small decrease in terms of the cost on the manufacturer side. So now looking at what I talked about a little bit earlier in terms of the investment in AI versus traditional hiring. The cost of hiring an employee is obviously significant. You've got the HR costs, you've got the onboarding costs, you've got the reduction in productivity of all of your team surrounding that person while they continue to train that person. You've also got the burden cost of the labor, so your salary plus all of your benefits and so on, the taxes that are involved, somewhere in the region of 70 to 100,000 per year. So per employee, you're kind of talking somewhere in the region of $80 to $150,000 per year for the first year, right? For a similar investment, you could probably get a 10 to 20% increase in the productivity of your entire team. So if you're a 100-person company, instead of getting one extra employee for that price, you could potentially get a 10% increase in productivity across your whole team, giving you essentially 10 to 20 extra employees by improving that productivity. That is huge. Think about the return on investment of getting 10 employees for the price of one. Some of the ROI examples here, you'll see some case studies. Microsoft seeing about a 3.5x return on AI investments already. Automation platforms are giving about a 300% ROI after 3 years. Most of the predictive maintenance implementations that companies have been doing are giving 10x returns. Just over 40% of AI adoption is reporting cost savings, and actual improvements within the first year. Although these things do take some time to get set up, we're generally seeing that the majority of the tools that we build are being implemented and start to reduce value within 3 to 9 months. So obviously, when you're in a workforce shortage environment, cost of labor is continually increasing. You need to get more from your current staff. You don't need more staff. That's essentially the situation that we're in right now. And when you look at the brain drain that we just talked about earlier in terms of manufacturing employees being over 55 and potentially leaving the workforce soon, you need to be looking at how you can start to capture that knowledge internally to make sure that you don't have these downstream effects of this brain drain when these people start to retire. And this isn't necessarily something that's going to increase your profits right now. So it's not really something I'm going to spend a huge amount of time on, but I will come back to this in a different video where I'll explain exactly how you can optimize this. How do you get started and where can you look for the biggest return on investment? In my opinion, and from what we've seen from all of our customers, where you need to be looking is optimizing the service contract sales. If you can sell more service contracts, a lot of these things downstream just figure themselves out. You get more part sales, you get more predictable service revenue, you get higher margins, and you also tend to sell more machines because your customer has a better relationship with you and the service offerings that you have. You need to be looking at deploying the AI-powered quoting automation that we talked about before. You need to generate your quotes faster. You need to be sending those to your customers quicker, sending more accurate quotes to make sure that you win that business at better margins. Then you need to be looking at implementing AI-powered search in your business. That's what we were talking about when we said information retrieval. When you've got information spread across all these different systems, if you can reduce the 1.5 to 2.5 hours a day that your team is spending searching for information by about 50%, as we said, that could be like getting another 10 to 20% of employees at your company. Other things then, field service. As we said, if you can improve your field service, you can start to sell more things out on your field service visits, but you will probably need to train your field service team on how they should be going about selling these. But the big benefit here is that if you're getting them to capture all this data and then you follow up with a quote in the report, there's a very good chance that these manufacturers are going to read that service visit report that you create for them, right? And if that just happens to include a quote here and there, I don't think they're going to be too annoyed, because at the end of the day, you're trying to provide value to them. You're not trying to just take their money. And finally, something that's more for the future, but it's definitely something you need to have in your head, is capturing that expert knowledge. You need to be looking at ways that you can capture that knowledge to keep it for future generations. I don't think we're ever going to see a 40-year employee at a manufacturing company again. I might be wrong, but I don't think it's going to happen. There's a lot of 40-year, 30-year employees that are at manufacturing companies right now. We need to capture their knowledge. We need to keep that for future generations, because otherwise, who knows what could happen when the knowledge at that company continues to drop. I would expect that you're going to have a drop in productivity, not a decrease in productivity improvement, right? So these are really important things to take away. And the biggest takeaway that I want you to see from this video is that AI is not just about cost cutting. I've seen that going around in tons of different places. People are only talking about the things around predictive maintenance. They're only talking about predictive analytics for cost cutting. Cost cutting is great, but where you should really be focusing your AI journey is to increase revenue and high margin revenue. If you can do that, you can start to increase the business or increase the volume coming into your business and grow your business. And if at some point you need to start cutting costs down the line, great, you can do that from a higher top line revenue number. As I said, start with the service contracts, start with the service optimization, start trying to sell more high margin revenue, more recurring revenue, and the rest will really figure itself out. I hope you got some value from this video. If you do want more information about the things that we do, it will be down in the link below. There will be more videos popping up on screen that will hopefully help you to understand how you can use AI in your manufacturing company. Thank you for watching this video, and I'll see you soon.